Okay, welcome in everyone. This is Achutabhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to be taking a look at Jupiter's entrance into Pisces from the perspective of each of the 12 whole sign houses. So this is a forecast for all of you out there based on your rising sign. And I'm coming down the home stretch of my Kickstarter, so I've decided I'm just doing lots of live streams lately. One of the reasons for doing live streams is they generate a lot more viewership in general. They sort of raise the raise the vibe and raise the energy and get people, participating a little bit more. And it's nice to see all of you and to connect with all of you too. And I have a little bit more spaciousness in my schedule around the holidays because for a couple of weeks, I'm not working with live clients or teaching classes. So I just have a little bit more space in my schedule. And usually live streams take up a little bit more of my time. So I happen to have that time. So here we are doing live streams for the past week or so. And I've really been enjoying it. It's been really fun to see where you all are coming from. So, in the chat box, tell me where you're coming from. We'll do roll call. Where in the world do you attend from? I'd love to hear from you guys. Today, we are also going to be, I've got one tarot card per sign, which means that for every sign of the zodiac, for every rising sign that we look at today, taking Jupiter into Pisces through the 12 whole sign houses, I've also got a tarot card for you to give you some sense of what you can expect. So that's what we're going to do today. We'll pull up the real-time clock and remind ourselves of Jupiter's entrance into Pisces, and then we'll dive in. Before we do that, you guys know exactly where I'm headed. We are in the process right now. Let's see if I can. Hold on. There we go. We're in the process of coming down. We're in the home stretch of our Kickstarter this year. We are at 1,105 backers right now, which means that we have just 262 backers left to go to meet our goal, which is 1,367 backers backing this channel in 2022. So if you haven't donated already, and thank you to the 1,105 of you who have already. If you haven't already, I'm putting the link into the live stream, into the live chat, but it will also be in the chat box of the normally posted video after the live stream is done. It's also in the descriptions of the video. You can click on it, visit the Kickstarter, and support this channel in the year ahead. Every donation matters. Every donation counts. We are almost there. We've been having really nice days the past couple of days. Everything's been going up really nicely. So if you visit the page and you scroll down, you can see all of the different rewards that you can get when you donate. I really appreciate your support. The mantra meditation video right now is 131 backers receiving that video, which is all about how to start a mantra meditation practice. This is what I do every morning prior to working on my content for the day. There's the astrology of 2022 video. I've got 164 people who are receiving this reward. This is my deep dive into the astrology of 2022. I just recorded it yesterday, and it comes with a calendar that marks out all of the major transits of the year and even the minor transits of the year. And you can use that calendar to follow along with everything that I'm talking about on my YouTube channel throughout the year. There's a creating a spiritual practice video, which is all about how to create a daily rhythm for yourself with some kind of daily spiritual practice. This is for, anybody who's looking for some advice about something like that. Got some other videos like Karma and the Nodes of the Moon, Mystical 7 Planets. One of the most popular ones that has 205 backers receiving this reward is the year ahead horoscope reading. That's really where I'm taking a look at all of the major transits for your rising sign for 2022. So giving you kind of a forecast for the entire year ahead. I don't do that anywhere else. That's just an exclusive thank you gift for contributing to the Kickstarter. We also have the most popular offering by far in terms of its, sort of bang for your buck is you can get 50% off any of my online courses. So if you want to study with me in my one-year program called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystics, sections begin in June and November of 2022. You could also apply it as a credit in 2023 if you, for some reason, needed to take your time. but you can apply this as a credit to my first year program. You could also use this for any of my 4 programs. You can attend any one of my courses for this rate, and that means 50% off any of my programs. You can also combine them. Let's say you wanted to take the year 1 and year 2 programs. The first year program focuses on understanding natal karmic context, meaning what the natal chart says about your karma in this lifetime. Year 2 is really about timing. When does the different karma indicated in my birth chart manifest or appear? At what times in my life will I see these kinds of events versus these kinds of themes and patterns? So year 2 is about forecasting and prediction, the timing of natal karma. Those 2-year program, that 2 years worth of content is truly the thing that I've poured myself into more than anything I've created outside of the daily content of this channel every day. There is over 100 hours worth of content in the year 1 program. We've got 12 guest lectures outside of that, breakout study sessions, optional homework reading assignments, tons of bonus material. We have a discussion forum, a tutoring staff. I mean, it's a fantastic program. And year 2 is also really, really good. The horary class, which is a specialty program, year-long class in horary astrology, you could also add in if you wanted to go bonkers and take 3 of my courses. We also have a year-long class that just started, a brand new one, just started in December, but the next one will be offered next December, which you could sign up for through the Kickstarter. That one's called Readings and Passages. That has to do with studying ancient source texts from the Hellenistic time period, as well as the demonstration of live readings with clients working on specific things. For example, the first month of the program, we're talking about how to read for children, and we're having parents come in with their children's charts. So that is a very applied advanced class, but you can bundle all 4 of them together and save tremendously. This is even, all of these rates are like $400 cheaper per class than the early bird rate. So you can really stack up the savings if you know you want to study with me sometime in the year ahead. And again, you can also use them as credits down the road. These donations that you give help us do a variety of things. First of all, they help us to make sure that there is built into everything we do a sliding scale donation-based tuition option, which basically means that you're able to, people out there can attend classes based on their budget if they can't afford the full price of a class for whatever reason. We have a variety of different hardship guidelines that we use, like you're only part-time employed, you're a single parent, you're receiving disability, whatever the case might be. We do our best to make sure that the spiritual science of astrology is super accessible financially. That happens because people take advantage of these rates during the Kickstarter. It happens because people pitch in and support this channel and all the free content that I create year round. So the business model for me, my wife and I owned and operated a donation-based yoga studio for almost 10 years, where a huge amount of our offerings, almost all of them, were available to the public by donation. What we trust is that people who have more will pay more or will pitch in, and that helps for people who don't. I followed this business model for a long time with success, and so I deeply believe in it, that this free content that I create year round is a platform for a way of succeeding in a business that does not depend on setting the prices so high for everything that a lot of people end up getting priced out, especially of astrological education. The next step, what we're planning to do this year into 2023 as our sort of target date, is to build a donation-based reading clinic where readings are also available. My readings are booked out for a year, right? And so we want to have a space where people can come in. Readings are more accessible, they're faster, they're easier to get, and the prices are more accessible. And that gives opportunities for people who have been through my programs, who are really good, need more experience, to get a little bit of money and to get paid and to get experience, while also people can come in and get readings for more affordable cost if they otherwise could not afford it. And you know what? Over the years, what I've seen is that people don't take advantage of this. Sometimes people take advantage of it. Mostly people don't. People who need that help get the help, and people who can pay do. That's what I love about the donation-based model. It's based on trust, and it's based on understanding that, what we're really all about is trying to create a business that is building something special within our field. So, the goals don't have to be mutually exclusive to do well as a business owner, but also to create things that are very accessible for people overall. For example, in the ancient world, one of the admonitions that you hear ancient astrologers saying is to make sure that astrology is accessible for people who are interested in it. So that is a huge goal of mine in this channel, and you all support that based on your contributions. You also know that I really pour my heart and soul into this. This is my spiritual practice. This takes up about half of my day creating content for all of you Monday through Fridays. So you can just know that if you're supporting this channel, you're supporting someone who comes and shows up and really tries to make sure that this is a place of spiritual integrity. That keeps me, I need it. It keeps me in line. You know what I mean? So at any rate, enough said. I really appreciate your support. We're almost there, right? We're almost there. We just need about 262 more backers by New Year's Eve. I think that the Kickstarter is technically open till like 8 in the morning or 9 in the morning on New Year's Day, but really everyone will be in bed by then. So we're just saying that, by midnight of New Year's Eve, we need to get about 262 backers by then. So it's the home stretch. We're banging the drum. We got to get there. See if we can do it. Thank you everyone for your support who's already donated. Really, really appreciate it. So I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to start taking a look at the 12 rising sign positions and Jupiter through the houses based on your rising sign positions. So we have this very major transit that we need to take a look at for everyone's. How is this going to affect you? Let's take a look at the real-time clock here and remind ourselves of what's going to happen. So by this evening, this is December 28th, let's take a look at how this evolves. You're going to see, here's Jupiter right around 11:30 p.m. East Coast time in the United States this evening. You see Jupiter ingress into the sign of Pisces. Yay! And goodbye, Saturn signs. We now have Jupiter in Pisces to stay all the way until the month of May. So this forecast is for about half of your 2022. What will Jupiter be doing in your life? Where will Jupiter's presence be felt? We're going to take a look at Jupiter's ingress into a new house in your birth chart and what to expect based on that new house position. And I've got a tarot card that's going to help me do some associative, symbolic associations as we go along. One thing to remember is that in ancient astrology, when a planet changes signs, two things generally happen. One, it changes dignities, which means that it will move from one planet's house to another planet's house. In this case, Jupiter is moving from Saturn's sign back-to-back years into its own sign, feminine, watery, sign of the fishes. We took a look at this yesterday in kind of a deep dive into Jupiter and Pisces and the Venus kind of way of knowing the wisdom of Venus, Jupiter and Pisces moving into a feminine sign. What does that look like? And we've explored this a little bit in late November as well, previewing Jupiter into Pisces. So you could go back into my archives and dig into the deeper philosophical meaning of this for at least a few videos we've got exploring this, as well as last summer when we had a little preview of Jupiter into Pisces. So the other thing to remember is that not only does the dignity change, but the house position changes, which means as a planet ingresses, usually right when it ingresses into the house, you'll really feel it, or you'll notice it, or it'll make a splash somehow and activate the topics of that house, moving the focus from a set of topics in the previous house to the new set of topics in the next house. So that's why we're doing this video today, to explore what new topics will be generated based on Jupiter's movement. And that whole sign movement, by the way, is based on a whole sign way of looking at your birth chart. So for those of you who use a quadrant-based form of house division, just track wherever the cusp of the 0 degree marker of Pisces is and that house position. But in Hellenistic and ancient astrology, as in Indian astrology, we use whole sign houses. So all of that Oh, and the last, it does one more thing. When a planet changes signs like this, it usually starts to be configured differently in your birth chart, which means it'll make aspects to different planets in your natal chart. No, I can't possibly cover that. We need, looking at each individual chart when you do something like that. But that's the idea, is that it will now be configured differently in your birth chart as well through aspect. That's something definitely to pay attention to. All right. So we're going to start with Aries and work our way through. And you know what? Before I do that, I just have to see, where are people coming in from? Let's see. Charlotte, Lakeland, Florida, Albuquerque, Michigan, Phoenix, Florida, a bunch of Floridas. Greece, Bulgaria, Los Angeles, the UK, Ontario, Maryland, Oklahoma, Raleigh, Redmond, California, Illinois, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Pittsburgh. Someone said, come on, slackers, be backers. Yay, thank you. That's awesome. Oh, gosh. Ireland, amazing. So cool. Well, thank you all for being here. Well, it's all just streaming in. So many people from Poland. That's amazing. And India. Nice. Okay. So let's dive in. We're going to start with Aries. Now, if you are an Aries rising, this means that Jupiter is working its way into your 12th house. Now, that place was called the house of the evil spirit, the evil daimon, and a place that is associated with, let's see here. Sorry. You know what? I'm going to blow my nose really quickly. I have to blow my nose so bad. I'll be right back, guys. Hold on. All right. The cold that never ends. I've like, this is my third week that my sinuses are still clearing out. Cold started 3 weeks ago, and this is my second or going on third week of it still like leaving. It's like the world's slowest, yuckiest cold. Okay, so Jupiter in the 12th house, if you're an Aries rising. First of all, this is the 12th house, which is called Malus Daimon, or evil spirit. It sounds like, really negative, like ominous and scary, but it really just means any kind of influence, any kind of person or energy or psychological pattern that is undermining the native, meaning the chart owner. And the things that undermine us are often the things that also like little, if you want to look at it from a kind of optimistic spiritual point of view, are usually are some of our best teachers, whether it's the people or the patterns in our own psyche, whatever takes us out of our center and pulls us off somewhere, gets us into, a jam. Oftentimes, those are the very things that becomes the raw material through which we do a lot of growth. I love Jupiter in this place because Jupiter in this place brings a lot more grace and ease into that kind of shadowy 12th house. The card that I pulled for you, if you are an Aries rising, is the Six of Swords. You can see in the Six of Swords that there's, looks like maybe like a woman and a child being paddled across like a lake. Maybe like looks almost like refugees or something. And there's swords in the boat, which kind of doesn't look good. But this sword, this card is usually associated with sort of like called the Bridge Over Troubled Waters card. This feeling of there's been some loss, there's been some hardship, and it's about moving on. And maybe there's some hope and redemption, but there's still some healing and grief and processing of something that maybe didn't work out. But the good news is that there's kind of a sense of starting to move beyond it, or finding a way of processing some kind of loss. So to me, if you're an Aries rising and you have Jupiter coming into your 12th house, this is actually one way of thinking about that transit that's very uplifting, which is to say, maybe you're going through a process of grieving or letting go of something, but also of pressing reset and trying to figure out what comes next. This would make sense if you're an Aries rising, because by May, Jupiter will be traveling through the troubled waters of the 12th house and moving directly into your first house in your home sign by about the middle of May. A pretty fresh new start by that point, but kind of the feeling of maybe moving through troubled waters with some grace and healing and the need to process something from the past as a theme between now and the end of the year. And I also would look for any kinds of spiritual practices that could help you, reflect upon and understand things that are happening, that you're, a transition that's being made somehow from the most positive and, kind of nurturing space available. So that's what I'm seeing as one major possibility for my Aries risings out there. We're going to move along now to Taurus rising. If you're a Taurus rising, Jupiter is going to land in your 11th house. Now, that is the place that was actually called the joy of Jupiter and the house of good spirit. Like the 12th is the house of the bad spirit, and the 11th right next to it was called the house of good spirit. If you're a Taurus rising, Saturn's sitting heavy in your 10th house. There's a lot of heavy things going on there. What I like about Jupiter in the 11th house is that it can certainly give a little bit of liftedness, a feeling of there being support. The 11th house is associated with allies and benefactors and friends and anyone that comes into your life and offers some form of a resource. For example, if you were to get a government grant or some form of assistance, helping like a small business loan from the government or something, if you were to meet people in your career who gave you opportunities that were really amazing, or if you were to find a group of people that felt like, these are my allies, these are my friends, I share something in common with these people, and through our networking or collaborations, we're able to achieve something that none of us can do individually. Jupiter in the 11th also the 11th house was called the place of acquisition. And so I think that there's some sense of just starting to receive benefits of something that maybe you've been working on for a while, given the presence of Jupiter and Saturn in the 10th, which can be emphasize a lot of work. So it's like something starting to pay off. I get, that feeling. The card that came up is really interesting. If you're a Taurus rising, the card is the Strength card. This is a major arcana card. And one of the things I often think when this card comes up, that they're one of two things. One, overcoming some kind of major hardship, and it will require integrity, character, and a kind of graceful touch dealing with someone or something that's hard to deal with, like the lion in the card. But the other thing is in having to overcome the ego and power and pride and to become your better self, overcoming some kind of desire, the lion being representative perhaps of something that needs taming within. You'd say, well, what does that have to do with the 11th house, right? The 11th house Jupiter. But I think the temptation of success, what are the temptations of success, right? You've got Jupiter coming out of the 10th house, Saturn is there, there's a lot of gravitas and so forth. Jupiter in the 11th can really reward and award people. And so what are the temptations that come along with some new level of success or prominence or something like that? Also, generally speaking, is there going to be the need to overcome something within groups that you belong to? Maybe there's a challenge to your character or integrity that's more social in nature somehow, and you're going to need to overcome it this year. But I like the idea of there being the support to do so. Also, I think about the idea of compassionate or charitable causes, and trying to demonstrate like a high level of character and integrity that you might be called to share yourself for some causes or something like that. Okay, so that's for my Taurus risings. For Gemini risings, you're going to find that Jupiter lands in your 10th house. Now that's usually associated with career, but also it's really a house that tells us a lot about what you're doing every day. Just literally what kinds of activities consume a lot of your time from the time you wake up to the time you rest in the evening. Jupiter in Pisces moving into this area suggests a blossoming, a very fertile period of activity for you if you're a Gemini rising. The card that I chose if you are a Gemini rising is the Two of Pentacles. I think the positive of this card is that there are multiple opportunities and there are the blossoming of new opportunities. The two is very early in the sequence of 10 cards that constitute the suit of Pentacles. So it's very early on in a process, perhaps, and there's different resources, different ideas, perhaps different things that could eventually yield what am I trying to say? Things that could yield income or financially lucrative things available to you in your career. But it's also a matter of balancing or juggling priorities, time, money, energy, resources, figuring out how to prioritize and discerning between which opportunities are the right ones. So the downside of Jupiter in Pisces in the 10th might be things are fertile, but it's also a matter of focusing and prioritizing. And making sure that you're being wise with the opportunities coming in. But I see this overall as a sign of new profitable enterprises coming your way, and possibly having to balance out probably your time and energy and resources given those opportunities. I think that's a really good position overall for Jupiter. One of the more positive looking cards that I drew overall today. So I think Geminis, I'd love to hear from my Geminis over the next 6 months, Gemini risings, and hear what you guys experience as Jupiter ingresses and spends its time. April should be really interesting, in particular as Jupiter conjoins Neptune for you guys in your career house. Let's go on to Cancer rising. With Cancer rising, Jupiter moves into your 9th house. And when Jupiter's in your 9th house, it's in the place that was called God, the place of the higher mind, religion, philosophical convictions, guiding beliefs, education, professors, sages, gurus, long journeys or foreign countries, foreign lands. Jupiter entering this house probably places a pretty strong emphasis on the topic of religion, beliefs, and so forth. For example, my wife is, for the first time since the kids were born, she's going to be taking a trip for herself, just herself. And grandma, my mom, is staying with me and the girls, and she's going abroad to spend some time in an ashram with a couple of our friends. There's Jupiter moving into Pisces. She's a Cancer rising, right, in her 9th house. I could see this being a year where your faith, the need for something transcendent, the need to explore the topics or subjects that inspire you, a year of learning and high-mindedness in general, questions about religion and faith being very important. Now, the card that I drew for you, if you are a Cancer rising, is the 7 of Cups. So you can see here, this is such a perfect card for Jupiter moving into eventually a conjunction with Neptune in your 9th house. The 7 of Cups is a card that, to my mind, speaks, of course, everyone will mention that it speaks to the potential for illusion and fantasy, as well as, asking questions about what is real or what is true or what can be trusted, what is fantasy and what is fiction. But it's such an applicable card for Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces in your 9th house if you're a Cancer rising. The idea of altered states, mystical union, the appearing of visions and inspiration, prophecy, omens, psychic ability, divination, things like 9th house is traditionally the place of astrology. So could those kinds of topics play a role this year? Absolutely. Could you also have a hard time discerning what is real and what is, some kind of fiction or fantasy? Yeah, that could also be It could also be a pretty big part of it. I'm looking at the Seven of Cups in this case and not being like, oh, this year you're going to drink the Kool-Aid and, join a cult and put on the, the Nikes as the comet comes by or whatever. I don't, I don't think it's going to go that dark, but I think it's just a message here to be discerning, to open yourself up to higher worlds, but also to be discerning as you go. So if you're a Leo rising, we'll move along. Jupiter is entering Pisces in your 8th house. So that ingress is really interesting. The 8th house was called the idle house, or the idle place in the gate of Hades. And it has to do with, so it's like the waiting room that planets occupy prior to moving into the Occident, that is the West, or the 7th house where planets set. And so there is something about this house that has dread associated with it, fear and anxiety as planets await their inevitable descent into the underworld. It's associated with death for the same reason, but usually more about fear and anxiety of the future, and also penalties or losses or things that come in time through death or through other people's legacies, or that even come to us through other people that we marry or become intimate with somehow. When Jupiter was in my own natal 8th house, I ended up inheriting a little bit of money from the death of my grandmother. And I also ended up inheriting the audio library of the late Robert Schmidt, because I was helping out in the process of doing a GoFundMe when he passed away. And they very nicely gave me some of his audio. It was like a, really expensive amount of audio if I were to have purchased it, and I just got to receive it. I had a lot of his audio already, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't have. So I got to kind of complete my library. So Jupiter in the 8th house gives things that come through death. It can make you, I remember very clearly how present the topic of mortality was that year when Jupiter was in my 8th house. So the topics of mortality, death, but also benefits and blessings that come through other people or other people's death. Also, the things that we may want to give to other people with charity. The 8th house can be a place of taxes, penalties, gifts through other people, but also the things that we are somehow obligated or bound to give other people. So these things are all really interesting. The card I drew for you, if you're a Leo rising, is the Hierophant. It's a really interesting card to draw for the 8th house. The way I see it, the Hierophant, I loved what Raph said last week. I don't know if you guys were listening to what Raph said about the Hierophant when he came on last week, but one of the things he said was that the Hierophant has something to do with people who have the power to initiate you, or rites of initiation. You can see what looks like two people who may be receiving some kind of official blessing, or maybe going before the person of the Hierophant to receive a title or something like that. So is there something that someone else bestows upon you, an authority figure that gives you a certification, that gives you an opportunity, that gives you the mantle or title of some kind? When you see this kind of movement, for example, when the other thing that was happening when Jupiter went into my 8th house was I was going through the initiating process of aspiring with my guru, who would eventually initiate me. So is there some person or power or authority that is going to grant you some kind of title or prestige or honor? That's possible. I think it's also possible that you're looking at your relationship with authority figures and what you owe them, or how you feel beholden to them or not. I think with Jupiter in Pisces, I don't imagine there being like a lot of corruption or scandal, because it's a pretty healthy Jupiter. So I think the relationship with people who have power or some kind of resource should be positive for you if you're a Leo. But the Hierophant card comes to mind, or the Hierophant card comes up, and all of its symbolism can be something to work with this year. All right, we're going to move on and look at Virgo rising. We're placing Jupiter in the 7th house if you are a Virgo rising. So this is the place of marriage and relationships. It's a place of sexuality. It's also a place that refers to the conclusion of toil and work. This is a place where planets set and disappear. And so the idea of resolution or completion comes about. Also, clearly, it's a place of marriage and, sexuality and relationships. It's obviously, everybody knows it as such. The card that I drew for you, if you're a Virgo rising, is the Page of Wands. Now, I was always taught that court cards, such as pages or knights or kings or queens, will tend to point to people, literal people that can come into your life. I don't think it's always literal. I've seen many cases where the page or a knight or something may refer to some quality within yourself that you're trying to draw forth. But the Page of Wands is a youthful character, often bringing a form of enthusiasm and passion and excitement, often the herald of some kind of new entrepreneurial activity or someone coming in with passionate ideas. If you're a Virgo rising, you could say, if you want to get really psychological about it, that with Jupiter entering a water sign in the 7th, that it's time to discover some part of yourself that is not as readily available to you as the Virgo qualities are that you're going to be identified with through its ruling your ascendant, which is to say that, Virgo, earthy, practical, meticulous, careful, thoughtful, these qualities might be more emotionally driven, more emotionally passionate, idealistic, romantic, kind of visionary qualities, Jupiter, Neptune. And maybe those are something that, maybe that's something that you're looking to bring forth from within yourself. But I would lean more in the direction of there's going to be someone that enters your life or relationships with people, either people you work with or people that come into your life and embody that Page of Wands quality, which I think, again, most generally could be described as very passionate, youthful, idealistic, inspired, and seeing that come through a person entering your life or someone in your life that is helping you bring forth those qualities in yourself. So, but overall, good. I think, I look at Jupiter in your 7th and say, it looks like it's a good year for, opportunities, abundance, good things kind of coming in through relationships. Don't be surprised also if the topic of pregnancy, marriage, sex, if those things play a big role as well, since Jupiter's in a very fertile position in Pisces, also the exaltation of Venus. Let's go on to Libra rising. If you're a Libra rising, then Jupiter falls in with Neptune into your 6th house, which was called the place of bad fortune, and it was called the joy of Mars. This is an interesting position. If you're a Libra rising, to me, the best thing about this position is that while this house tends to bring hard work, conflict, toil, sickness, struggles, Jupiter is the planet that you would want in the 6th house, well dignified, because it tends to bring the sense of relief, redemption, healing, positive outcomes that, or what I should say is that it brings those things despite the conflict, or it brings them out of the conflict and provides a kind of silver lining. For example, you also will often see people pouring a lot of work into things that they deeply care about, that they deeply believe in, that they're very inspired about, and that give them a lot of satisfaction. So there's a lot of sacrifice and hard work, and the feeling of, nose to the grindstone, but it's joyful. There's a feeling of, I'm in the Lord's army. You know what I mean? The 6th house is associated with military and with fighting and conflict and hard work under the heat of the sun and slavery. And it was associated with sickness. But when you have Jupiter, the great benefic, in there with Neptune, there's a very almost like Christ-like energy and a feeling of something that's very redeeming within the battlefield or on the battlefield of life. So I think that this is overall pretty redemptive space for Jupiter. Now, the card that I drew for you is the World. Really interesting card to draw, not at all what I would have expected. But what I started thinking about this, I kept thinking, well, what's really interesting is the idea that some kind of conflict or some kind of work in your life, a great work, could be coming full circle. The World often refers to great times of change, but usually marked by the sense of an era being over, or the mark of like completion and finishing some great cycle or some great work. I got to love that if you're a Libra rising with Jupiter in your 6th, because the great work of Jupiter, Neptune, especially around the month of April for you, could be reaching a completion point. Is there some sense of finishing something, or of something that's coming full circle in your life. I would look for that and look for a positive resolution to challenging themes that maybe have a history behind them as well. All right, let's go forward to Scorpio rising. If you're a Scorpio rising, then Jupiter is going to enter your 5th house, which was called the house of good fortune and the joy of Venus. This is a place that has to do with creativity, of course, in the arts, but also pregnancy, children, procreative energy in general, with Jupiter entering, again, the fertile water sign in the 5th house. Now, sometimes cards come back and they offer juxtaposition. I think this card is a card of juxtaposition. Here's Jupiter entering a very fertile place, and a place that's associated with things that should give us a sense of creative satisfaction or joy and pleasure in life, especially when we're doing things that fall in line with the offering or use of our gifts and talents. Well, here, the card that came back is the 7 of Pentacles. Now, the 7 of Pentacles shows a person who has done a lot of work, where they're sort of resting and looking over the work that's been done. Now, sometimes you can say that this card might be someone who is, being too leisurely or lazy or something like that. Well, Jupiter in the 5th house, one of the things that can come up is indulgence, like way too much indulgence when there's still work to be done. So you might want to watch for that a little bit. But this is also about surveying the good things that have grown in your garden and saying, what do I want to do with them? Where do I want to go next? Or how do I want to use an abundant resource, knowing that there's still some work to go? So, or some things that need to be done. When I think about this with Jupiter in your 5th house, if you're a Scorpio, this is the time where you're like, do we want to have more kids? I don't know. We've already got 3 of them, or you say, what do I want to do with the resources and assets that I have? Should I do something? Should I spend them on a vacation? Should I take some time off and of my day job? I've got some money saved up. Should I take some time to write that book I've been wanting to write? The idea, though, of like surveying what you have and where you want to go, what brings you joy, and how you should spend or use resources. What are you planning for your own future? And the question about joy and creative fulfillment and use of your resources, that all comes to mind right now for Jupiter entering your 5th house. It's also a very fertile and abundant energy in general. So, but when things are fertile, they don't last forever. So how am I going to use it? That comes to my mind. All right, so let's go on and look at Sagittarius rising. This takes Jupiter into the 4th whole sign place, a place that's associated with home, family, roots, land, property, family karma overall. Sometimes the cards offer these interesting juxtapositions, as I was saying. And to me, the card that came back, if you're a Sagittarius rising, is not as indicative of Jupiter in Pisces as it is about contrasting energies that are going to be almost like a duality or a dichotomy that's going to be present for you this between now and May. So Sagittarius rising, the card that I drew for you is the King of Swords. Now, typically this figure is like a very mental, rational authority figure, speaks to things like, the importance of mental clarity, a rational plan. This is like, I think of people, the gospel of, be well organized and have your ducks in a row and, meet the day with a plan every day. This is the King of Swords. To me, that's a very interesting card to come back for Jupiter, an authority figure, but entering a water sign, which is much more about the presence of emotional intelligence. So I wonder about the balance between mental, rational, and emotional intelligence this year for you if you're a Sagittarius. You may, for example, be uncomfortable with the level of emotional potency entering your life in the most vulnerable place, in your living environment, around home, family, and marriage. And you may be, it may be overwhelming, and you may attempt to try to manage these energies with an overly rational or rigid approach. I would be very careful about that, especially given that Saturn is present in your 3rd house, a place of the mind, still in a fixed air sign. So I wonder about the balance between the mental and the emotional this year for you in general, but also the king could represent, an authority figure of some kind, someone with a great amount of knowledge or wisdom that's entering your life in a very personal way, or that is offering you a way of a new way of doing things. Sometimes, Sagittarians are driven by passion. The King of Swords could also say, make sure that this year passion isn't driving you to the place that you're not in control with good mental habits. This could also be a way of saying that men or authority figures in the family, a patriarch of a family or something like that, is going to die or pass away. I could also see the potential for, any kind of expansion at the roots, births in the family, marriages in the family, purchasing home or property, and having to, really organize things so that you can make that purchase. All of your finances have to get organized or something like that. So let's go on. If you are a Capricorn rising, then Jupiter in Pisces is moving into your third house, place that was called Dia, goddess, and the joy of the moon. A place that has a lot to do with the mental and emotional environment of our bodies and minds, but also has something to do with the fluctuations of the environment around us, everything that kind of constellates around the home and the roots, including things like our siblings, our neighborhood, and so forth. But a place that, in my mind, has a lot to do also with our mind, our mental and emotional health. The card that came back for you is the Four of Swords. Now, to me, this is one of the cards. It's a very diverse card. It often speaks to meditation. When you have that Four of Swords showing, and it's basically a picture of someone, almost like a shrine or a memorial or something like that. And you see that kind of resting energy. The idea to me here is about remembering, because here's a memorial, almost like, the tomb of like a fallen soldier or something. So is there some need to remember, some need for quiet and a devotional mindfulness this year? I think that's one way of reading Jupiter in the third, that it's going to provide you with this kind of meditative mood for the year, or the need to embody some kind of meditative approach to life as a moving prayer. But the Four of Swords could also speak to maybe the potential for like mourning or remembering someone or something that passes. And I could also see this being a time where there's a need to create like a different kind of space for your mind, to learn something, to study something, almost like create a reading nook in your house or something like that. But I get the feeling of remembrance, devotion, mindfulness, meditative states, remembering things, memorialization of things. And that energy is, to me, may grant a lot of peace. And, very practically speaking, when you bring the Four of Swords into your life, I find that you can make decisions with a lot more clarity. And there's an emphasis on nipping things in the bud before they can become mentally troublesome, like a pattern that's rising in the mind that the Four of Swords comes up, and it's usually like, it'll speak to me as a way of saying, don't let that thing get stronger because it'll take over. So it's a time to put it to rest, or it's a time to step back and reflect and notice what's happening, and don't let something take over or take control of you. So those are a few things that come to my mind for Capricorn rising. Let's move to Aquarius rising. Jupiter in your second house. I love this one because it can be really good for finances. Jupiter in the second house of income and expenditures. Resources can come into your life, money can come into your life, business propositions, and just a fertile energy in general can come into your life. You can overdo things, you can spend too much, you can eat too much, and so forth. But I like this position overall as one of the more, it's always kind of a happy year when Jupiter comes to your second. Just don't, it's like the whole adage of don't go to the grocery store if you haven't eaten. So just, be careful of perhaps overspending or overindulging. But the Ace of Swords comes up for you, which can also speak to, a new proposition, a new beginning, the idea, a new idea that appears and becomes very important. And I would probably link the appearance of the Ace of Swords to a new idea appearing around business, money, finances, your professional life, and so forth. The one thing to note about the Ace of Swords is that there's the swords in general usually imply some degree of conflict and like work. So are you taking up a new cause, something that you're passionate about? Just know that there may be a theme of like intensity that follows with it. It's not surprising to me, for example, that Jupiter will pop into Aries and move into your third house, where there's maybe a feeling of like mentally having to fight for things. And so whatever ideas are coming up between now and May could be very abundant, fertile, inspiring. Let's go do it. You know, very entrepreneurial, Jupiter in the second house. But I would be a little bit cautious because Jupiter in Aries to me suggests that there could be a lot of competition or conflict or the need for a lot of work. There's just a lot more that comes after an Ace of Swords. So it's just always something to keep in mind. All right, let's go forward to Jupiter in Pisces, the final place, and maybe my favorite place overall for Jupiter, coming into the home sign of my Pisces rising people out there. This is a great time for the feeling of rebirth, renewal, restoration of your health, a sense of growing confidence, especially after 2 years of having Jupiter and Saturn ruled signs, one in its fall in your 11th, then in your 12th with Saturn. So I love this as a time of rebirth and renewal. The card that came back is a total juxtaposition card. The Nine of Swords. Now, this card looks really ominous on the surface, but to me is one of the more positive cards of the tarot if it's taken in the right way, in the right spirit, because it tends to represent this card worries and fears and so forth, like a bad dream. But the thing is that it's not real, right? So often the Nine of Swords comes up, it's like you're worrying about something you don't need to be worrying about. And I see this transition of Jupiter in Pisces as growing sense of confidence and faith and trust, and really letting go of the whatever has been possessing your mind in a spirit of worry. Saturn's in the 12th, right? So that's still there for you if you're a Pisces rising. But I see this next 6 months or so as an opportunity for you to move beyond the shadow of your fears and worries and anxieties and gain a sense of confidence and faith, and a renewal of confidence and faith after dealing with some of the more difficult elements of Saturn and Jupiter in your 12th house over the past year. So I look at that card and I don't think that's what's promised. Well, you know, Jupiter in the first does not strike me as a place of worry and fear and so forth, but it will conjoin with Neptune in the first house in April. And I see this as a time of, clarifying what is real and what is worthy of your time, your energy, your effort, your faith, your commitment. And don't let it be that what's driving you this year is, something that you're terrified of, or something that you fear in the future. Don't let the mind drive your efforts, because people will sometimes really squander a Jupiter first house year by doing things with that energy that are like for example, one of the things that people with Jupiter in the first house will do, that they'll feel so good about themselves, they'll feel so good in general that they'll eat too much. And then Jupiter in the first just means your body's getting like too big, you're putting on too much weight or something like that. Jupiter in the first house can mean overconfidence, and therefore the overconfidence comes with it's like the pride that comes before a fall. Don't let the Nine of Swords be like some harsh wake-up call, or the constant underlying fear and anxieties that tend to crop up when we're being overly confident and cocksure and ungrounded about things. Then you get plagued by worries that start coming up, because the sort of opposite energy comes in. I'm so confident about everything, and then at night I'm gripping my, I'm dreaming, and it's all worry because the overconfidence is being compensated for with a sense of fear and anxiety. So you got to be careful about those things when Jupiter's in the first house. The potential for wild overconfidence swinging into a feeling of not being worth anything, and that's the kind of manic behavior, you could say, of Jupiter in the first house at times. But otherwise, I think that this is about overcoming fears and being confident and realizing that, you have what you need within you, and don't let worries and phantoms, so to speak, kind of keep you up at night. This is a year for I think Pisces people in particular. This is a year to gain a sense of personal rebirth, renewal, and confidence. Okay, so we've gone through all 12 of the rising signs. I love to hear from you guys. If you guys ever have stories, remember that you can always share them by emailing me with you can use the hashtag grabbed in the comments section and share a story. You can also email us, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. We'll be sharing more from these planetary transits and some stories that you guys have been sending to me probably next week or the week after, once we get into the new year a little bit. But don't forget, everyone, as of the start of this video, we're just 262 backers away from our goal this year. We have 4 days left to go, literally 4 days left to go. So really need your support. If you can pitch in. Thank you to everybody who has. If you haven't yet, everything helps. Pick up one of my classes. Pick up the Astrology of 2022 lecture, get a calendar with it. Everything really helps. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. It's been really fun to do all these live streams with you guys. We will be back tomorrow with more fresh content, probably taking a look at Mercury coming into a conjunction with Pluto, which is happening this week as well. So we're going to break that one down and give you some sense of that archetypal combination to work with this week. So, all right, that's what I've got.